And certainly, I think something that's been demonstrated up in Glasgow at the moment, and this is really part and parcel of what we're going to be talking about here today in the InterManager webinar and seminar here, looking at the whole issue of COP26 and Fit for 55. Are they fit for purpose? Or to quote Mark, just a little bit too little or too late, I think Mark was quoted in Tradewinds as saying. But, it is a dilemma. Or is it a much needed addendum to the future standards that ship managers are determined to abide by? And I think this is a key element there. As just really sort of going on a little bit of a couple of minutes chatting about it before I introduce the speakers, and I'll ask for their perspectives on the subject matter itself before we then go into a general debate. And then I'll also ask the audience, be it virtual or in person, there, over there in Cyprus, and I'll be relying on my my helper there, Kuba, to actually collate any questions there from the audience. But we can let's get these questions coming into the panelists as well. But really, I think the nub of it is, as regional and international regulators seek to agree global decarbonisation rules, have the owners and the managers of the world's fleet missed the boat in being able to influence this outcome? What do ship managers want from the new rules, and what are the likely repercussions for an industry intent on decarbonising but needing to have its voice heard? It also throws up this whole issue of the regional versus the international regulation debate. I mean, this has been going on for years and years. Who will win out in the race to be green? All of this is against this sort of backdrop by ship managers to be listened by the regulators. It's interesting, really, with COP26. Some of you may have seen some on the Twitter feeds today. The UK is one of 19 countries to sign the Clydebank Declaration. Nusrat Ghani's just put something online a couple of minutes ago. This will see the UK supporting the establishment of green shipping corridors, zero-emission maritime routes between two or more ports, with the aim of having at least 6 created by 2025. She refers to it exactly the sort of proactive government commitment we've been calling for to make sure that the maritime sector can hit the IMO's 2050 target. Now, when we also bring into that the Fit for 55 initiative by the European Union, it does actually sound like an exercise program for the middle-aged, Fit for 55, and I'd certainly qualify for it. But, it is the EU's plan, the Commission's plan, to set the EU on a course to slash greenhouse emissions by 55% by 2030. And drastic changes are in store. And indeed, when they announced it, Greece, which is the world's largest ship-owning nation, went on the offensive and advised Brussels to do more research before taking any decisions that might cost its owners hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's a very emotive issue, and I'm very, very keen to get the points of view and the comments from the speakers today. So I'm just going to go through our panel today. We have Mark O'Neill, President of InterManager. Hello, Mark, and President of CSM. And Mark's been quite vocal on a number of issues since taking over as President of InterManager, on the need for organisations like InterManager to work with its peer group, be allowed in to work with the owner peer groups, to do and to work on key issues like this and initiatives like the environment. Kuba Szymanski, all of you will know him, Secretary General of InterManager. Hello, Kuba. See your left ear there. Sitting next to Alistair Evatt, MD, past President of InterManager and also Managing Director of V Ships in Cyprus. So we look forward to getting the comments of both of you gentlemen there. We also have David Vernoval, Executive Chairman of BSM. David, hello, welcome from the Isle of Man. So indeed, again, as a major ship management company, along with Columbia and Fleet and what have you, it'd be good to get your input as well. Delighted to welcome Captain Eugen Adami, Managing Director of the Mastermind Group. Eugen, welcome from Hamburg. Nice to see you coming in online today. Also, we have Captain John Albrecht, who we can see there. Hello, John, Deputy Managing Director of Softconflot. So very keen to get your views as well. And we're also delighted to welcome Sotiris Raptis, Acting Secretary General of EXA, European Community Ship Owners Association, organisation I know very well in Brussels. Sotiris, very pleased to have you on board, and looking forward to hearing your thoughts and your input from an owner perspective there, and sitting from a European perspective. And also Sunil Kapoor, Director of Fleet. Sunil, always a delight to have you on our roundtable debates. So we look forward to getting your views on that. If we can start, and we do have about an hour and 20 minutes or so. So I'm going to kick off really asking each of the panelists, and if you could stick to 3 minutes each, just to give your perspective on this issue of COP26 and Fit for 55, about ship management's role in all of this and what role it should have, against that backdrop, and that important backdrop of managers driving for standards and adhering to global standards. I mean, part of that shipping industry for that side of it. Mark, President of InterManager, do you want to get the ball rolling on this? Could everybody else put themselves on mute?
Can I make a sound check first? Can you hear me, guys?
Yes, we can, John. Yeah, lovely.
Okay, so I have full headset on now, so now it appears to be working. Thank you.
Excellent, sir. No problem at all. So if everybody can put themselves on mute, and Mark, over to you, 3 minutes each, and then I'll come on to the next panel. Start with yourself, sir.
Thanks, Sean. As you said, I've been quoted as saying too little, too late. And of course, that is very much an attempt to get attention and get the right attention, because, first of all, I don't think it's ever too late, providing we learn from the mistakes of the past. We've got to remember that up until now, shipping and aviation have considered themselves to be outside of the Paris Agreement, and that in itself is astounding, where anybody should have seen this environmental juggernaut coming towards us, and we have to some extent been in denial that the environmental juggernaut affects our industry. Well, boy, is it going to affect our industry. I think COP26 was a fantastic opportunity missed, insofar as shipping should have had its house in order well before COP26, so that it controlled the narrative. And in any important argument, it's vitally important to control that narrative and come to debates such as COP26 with clear, formulated positional statement. We not only didn't have our house in order, we hadn't even designed the foundations. And we had a wonderful debate, a shipping debate at COP26 on the sidelines of COP26, when actually we should have come well before with a properly formulated statement, with properly formulated proposals, with that investigation and that scrutiny that the Greek Ship Owners Association invited Brussels to do, which we should have done as a sector ourselves well before COP26. It's not too late, but providing we learn from this missed opportunity and get down to the scrutiny and the research that is now needed, because there are so many issues that need to be tackled as a sector. So I think not too late, but certainly too little, and it's time we rectified that.
Okay, thank you, Mark. A number of points there I'll bring up after we've heard the other inputs there, but there's some interesting and valid points there. Alistair, let me come on to you. What is your perspective?
I'm just waiting for Cooper to come off mute. Sean, thank you very much for the opportunity. And I think it's been interesting that the feedback from COP26 is it's a bold ramping up of ambition rather than a detail of actions. And I have to say that after I was invited, and I think like all the companies, we've got colleagues that are totally focused on these issues. And I have to say that I was absolutely overloaded with acronyms by the time I'd sort of studied to get myself ready for this event. I agree with Mark. I mean, ship management has an enormous part to play in this, but we're part of a circular economy. We're part of a supply chain that goes really from production to ship to delivery, shipping to the point of sale. But ship management, we actually have a large number of touch points that we can influence. So we've got a large part to play. So I mean, my feeling is that as a ship management, as an industry, we've got to demand clear communication on the challenges ahead. And given the amount of time that it will take to develop alternative fuel, where it's important to bridge the gap between regulatory legislators focused on climate change and those practitioners with a deeper understanding of shipping. And we've got that knowledge. So we need to strike a balance between ambition, being pragmatic, but most importantly for our industry, being realistic, Sean.
Thank you. Thank you, Alistair. Yeah, I mean, it does beg the question about how effective ambition versus pragmatism can be against the backdrop. We'll come on to that again in a second. Some good points coming out here. David, let me come on to you. David Vernoval. Do we have David?
Yeah. Thank you, Sean. Thanks for the invitation to the seminar as well. Yeah, I think from a ship manager's role, what we are good at is adhering to legislation. It's what we built our reputation around largely. But the problem is legislation when it comes to environmental matters is largely driven by IMO. And we all know that is probably the lowest common denominator that the member states can agree to. So we're meeting the requirements, but at a very low level. And I think the biggest input that managers can have in the short term is realizing that and making sure we build the capability to optimize current technology, because that's not going to change in the next few years. We have ships in the water that will be around for 10, 20 years, potentially. But we can make the better effort to make sure they are optimized to their fullest potential in terms of the technology itself, the utilization in operation, weather routing, for example, but also that we make the effort to mold human behavior, because a lot of the efficiency gains we see on vessels can only be achieved with the operators on those vessels understanding what it is we want and having the correct attitude to deliver. And then in the longer term, what we need to do as managers is build a knowledge base to understand what the new technologies are, what the potential is, what new processes could be, and then build that into a strong narrative that helps ship owners make the right decisions depending on the operational environment of the ships that they intend to own in the future. And that's something we can do as individual ship managers, and it's something we can do as an international organization such as InterManager as well, building best practice for the future. And we can influence that because while we may not own ships, we very often have a role to play in the new building construction, looking at the shipbuilding specifications and making sure that those specifications fit for the intended use of those ships.
Thank you very much indeed, David. Thank you. And I want to come on actually also when we have our debate talking about how the industry can work together. And I think this is something that was raised a month or so ago about the sort of committee of shipping, an international committee of shipping. Maybe they could be working on this. Satiris, let me come in and bring you in on this, and certainly from an EXA and a ship owner perspective, you're starting to hear a bit of a sort of positions from the managers here. What about from the owners side? What are your thoughts?
Thank you, Sean, for the invitation, for the opportunity to participate in this discussion. From our side, COP26 is about bringing everybody in the spotlight. It's about the commitments of the UN nations, how much the UN nations have already contributed, how much they have put on the table towards the 1.5 objective of the Paris Agreement. And I have to say that it's the first time that the International Energy Agency found that it's the first time that the commitments can keep the increase of global temperature below 2 degrees. And this is something important. If all these pledges are met in the following years. And at the opening of COP26, we saw also some important developments. The methane pledge that may have some implications for shipping. The commitment of 40 UN nations to phase out coal by 2050. This might also have some implications for coal trade. We have also seen announcements from different states about carbon neutrality or zero carbon objective at IMO level. We have seen also a call of other countries to go ahead with a market-based measure at IMO level. But what I'm trying to say is that COP26 is about bringing all the nations together and measure how much the pledges of the private sector, but importantly, the commitments of the countries are on a path to keep the increase of global temperature well below 2 degrees. Turning to the 55 package and where 55 comes from. 55 is the new climate target of the EU for 2030. It's the new target of the European climate law, and there is a basket of legislative proposals now under negotiation between the European Parliament and the Council member states in Brussels, a basket of measures to implement this 55 increased climate targets for the European member states. And in this regard, the revision of the EU ETS and the inclusion of shipping into the emissions trading scheme is coming to implement this increased climate ambition. There is another legislative initiative, the so-called Fuel EU Maritime at European level, that aims to introduce a fuel standard, a carbon intensity improvement objective target for 2025 and 2030 at European level. And this was also the basis of a submission of the 27 EU member states to the IMO as well. We have a couple of comments, and we have also a couple of concerns about both proposals, the EU ETS and the Fuel EU Maritime. But European ship owners, as a matter of principle, welcomed the increased climate ambition at the European level. And of course, we would have preferred that the IMO regulates our industry. We're an international industry, and naturally we have a strong preference for global solutions. But at the same time, we say that we're ready to contribute our fair share also in the context of the European regulations. But I would like to make a comment, especially for the Fuel EU Maritime. This is something that we find really concerning. It's about a fuel standard applied, though, to all bunkering, to international bunkering operations. It's not only about EU fuel suppliers. It's not only about bunkering within the EU. Under this piece of legislation, ships will be subject to a target no matter where they bunker. And the thing for us, the concern for us, is that the Europeans will come in and try to regulate non-EU fuel suppliers, creating, first of all, significant enforcement loopholes. But I don't want to elaborate more. We'll probably have the opportunity later in our discussion today. I would leave it there on the Fuel EU. On the EU ETS, our main, two main comments we have come up with concern the investment of the revenues generated by a carbon pricing mechanism in order to incentivize the uptake of cleaner fuels, aiming to bridge the gap, the price differential between clean fuels and conventional fuels. And another comment I would like to make concerns the role of the commercial operator. The EU ETS in principle addresses operators. The main objective is to incentivize operators to improve efficiency. The thing, though, is that under the current proposal on the EU ETS, it is in principle the owner who pays the costs and surrenders, purchases, allowances, EU ETS allowances. Our proposal is that this needs to be sorted out, that we need to bring the commercial operator into the picture, and in case the operator is an entity, in case the owner is not the entity that runs the ship, we need also to make, under the EU ETS, the operator to bear the costs.
Matthias, thank you very much indeed. And there's a number of points there, and I think we will come into the debate on the issue of bunkering and also on the commercial operator charter and their roles to play. So just one quick thing. I mean, COP26 is happening at the moment. It's being reported on. Boris Johnson's flown back up to Glasgow to try and kickstart it again. There's a lot of talk about the results being fudged. That very little will actually come out of it. In 30 seconds, what is your prediction? Will COP26 be a failure or will it be a success?
I have been following the UNFCCC conferences for a long time now in different roles. I wouldn't go for a black and white approach. I think that the aim in this kind of conferences is to bring everybody together, to raise awareness about the UN nations and about in the public opinion as well. And I personally find it already positive that there are a lot of pledges by private initiatives, but it's also the first time that it seems that the commitments taken by the UN nations put us on a path to achieve the Paris Agreement objectives. Of course, that doesn't mean a lot for nations that might end up under the water the next 20 years, like the Marshall Islands. But we have to also take into account that this is a UN process that aims to bring everybody on board. And climate crisis is an issue that we can either deal with all together and not alone. So I will, by nature, optimistic and positive.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear. I mean, I will put it against the backdrop, and the panelists will no doubt talk a bit more about this in a second. But against the backdrop of, the time for talking is gone now. We've got to act. Time is running out. It's 1 minute to midnight, all that side of it. And you're dealing with the COP26 that doesn't have China, Russia, and you've got Saudi Arabia that are sort of blocking a number of things at the moment. But we'll no doubt come on to these later on. Matthias, thank you. Kuba, let me bring you in on this, your sort of views on this. COP26 and Fit for 55, are they fit for purpose? What are your thoughts?
Well, obviously, probably not up to me to decide, to be honest. I appreciate the fact that you are asking for it. But I think what we should miss and make sure that we are not missing, we are this, as Alistair was saying, we are vital link between many, many parties. And one of the parties is the ship management itself. And it never fails to amaze me how responsible we feel. And sometimes I'm thinking we feel more responsible sometimes for owners, commercial operators, so this was talking about. And we are very shy to actually shout and say, hold on, stop here, guys. We are not the only one responsible for ships. We do have ship owners, we do have commercial operators, and we need to bring them to the picture and start talking to them. So I would like to see us be a bit more bold. We do have a knowledge, we do have expertise. And now the second thing I would really like to bring into
is we have our people. We've got seafarers. And if you were to be on board of a vessel, and I've just been and I visited and I spoke with my colleagues, they are all talking about COP26. Surprise, surprise. They are extremely responsible as well. And they are bursting with ideas saying how they can actually make a change. They are talking about the low-hanging fruits. So just listen to them as well, and you will know that. Now, one thing which we probably need to be, again, bolder than we are, is the education of the industries outside of shipping industry. Before coming to AGM today, I was discussing something with a colleague of mine who is a business person in Poland, who is bringing a lot of fruits. And he didn't realize, he himself, who brings a lot of that, he didn't realize that 90% of his stuff is brought by ships. He only sees containers. And when he sees container, he sees trucks. And he believes, because he's in Warsaw, that everything from Ecuador is probably coming by this truck. Yeah, Roger is already laughing. I was laughing. And when I told him, he said, could you write me an article? I didn't realize that. Then we've got ships involved. And when I told him a scale we are involved, I blew his mind. And this is what I think we need to do. And I will be very controversial here, and you will probably call me an old dinosaur. I think the other industries will come knocking on our door because we are leading in many aspects and areas, and we can save the world when it comes to recycling of fuel. There will be a lot of new initiatives, but the world will be stuck with something which is not recyclable if we do not burn heavy fuel. And what will we do with heavy fuel? And I believe in 2-3 years' time, we should say, you know what? We can burn it for you, but on our terms, not on your terms. And I even venture saying they will pay us money. I know it's silly what you are thinking now, what I'm saying, but I believe if we package this correctly, we can save the world, because world has no idea what to do with things which we are now very ambitious about. Everything from me, thank you.
Thank you, Kuba. And that's interesting really as well. I think when you look at shipping's future role within the supply chain as well, you know, and it's interesting you talked there about, you know, the world will be coming to shipping, but shipping also, you know, may well be required to fit in with the demands of the customer and the charterer. I mean, it comes to things like sustainability and the environment. And you know, as shipping becomes part of the Amazons and their supply chains and the way that changes, that's going to be an interesting thing moving forward. Thank you for your comments there, Kuba, certainly on the point about crew and people and training, which will be a thing to come on to. Let me come on to John Albrecht. We can hear you now. Your sort of comments on the sort of the COP26 and Fit for 55, whether they're fit for purpose, but also looking against that, you know, the role of the owners and the managers and shipping in trying to influence. I think that's the key thing we want to get out of this debate. Over to you, sir. Yeah, we now can't hear you, John.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can, yeah.
Okay, great. So my comments, thank you first of all for the invitation. So my comments echoes largely what has been stated in the past. Firstly, Kuba, I am not Sovcomflot like Sergei Popravko. I work for SCF Management Services, which is the in-house manager of Sovcomflot. But anyway, as ship managers, they act as agents for on behalf of the owners. And unless we get the right ships to manage, we will never be able to do much, at least with the ships that are on the water. Because all these minor things with sails, putting something on the rudder, putting something on the propeller, reducing the speed here and there, downrating the engines, doesn't really drastically reduce the emissions. So ships on the water will be difficult to cut the emissions a lot. And to lower the carbon footprint going forward, that depends very much on technology, technological advances, especially around maybe ammonia, hydrogen, more on LNG, engine development, and alternative fuels, and of course, infrastructure, which is missing for most of the new fuels. So the shipping industry itself can probably not drive this by itself. We need engine manufacturers involved. We need oil majors involved. they are oil fuel producers as well. Shipping industry is dependent on other sectors. And this COP26 is not new. It dates back to the 1990s, of course. And I'm not sure that this is the one and only effective mechanism that we have. There seems to be a disparity between the rich nations and the poor regions, which pollutes more heavily. And the lack of unity and lack of commitment from the entire world seems to be missing at this point, which was already stated. We also mentioned, previous speaker also mentioned the commercial impact, which I find is very, very heavy on how we operate, because they set the speed of the ships. We have had cases whereby we have a ship fully loaded, and because there was a slight difference in the price of the cargo, the ships deviated from one country to the other 2 times. So just putting more transport miles on it without any real reasons. Few words about Fit 55. Personally, I don't see it as a solution. It basically allows some stakeholders to pollute at a cost, and there is no evidence that I have seen to suggest that the funds generated from the emission fee or levy will be channels for R&D on more effective engines or new fuels. I think it's a bit of a attack on the shipping industry itself. We may agree or disagree to that, but we need different motivators in the industry to decarbonize. And I think the only real motivator here, which can drive this really, really forward, is of course the IMO. And we already have very strict deadlines set. We have our 2030 deadline. We have the 2050 deadline. We have 2023 deadline for different things. We're all now calculating with EEXI and CII how to do it. And whatever it is, it will be a very mixed bag of technologies and maybe mixed bag of future fuels also going forward, what could be used. So Softcomflot, we have of course banked heavily on LNG. We have now 6 vessels on the water, which are dual fuel LNG, heavy fuel oil, burning LNG in the ECA zones. We have a number of new buildings on the water, new buildings on the order book, also coming with LNG. But LNG will most likely be a transition fuel because it cuts only 23% less CO2 than very, very low sulfur fuel oil. So we need to move on to other things future down the road. But the technology is not really there yet. They are talking about bio LNG and e-LNG, etc., etc. But when it comes to hydrogen, ammonia, methanol, I mean, the technology is simply not there. So we're talking most likely post 2030 before we can see something that is really, really different and that can help. But obviously, ship owners and ship managers will have a very big problem in the years to come. Try to figure out how to operate the ships at what speed, and without the commercial operators involved in that equation and that KPI, and who will pay for what at the end, it would be a very difficult equation, so to speak, to sort out.
John, thank you, and I'm pleased you did manage to get your microphone to work. Some valid points there. Thank you. So, Tiras, just before I go on to Sunil and on to Eugen, do you want to just respond to that point there that John was saying there for Fit for 55, allowing stakeholders to pollute at a cost? I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, we do want to try and get level playing fields here, but what are your thoughts?
This is one of the points we have raised as European ship owners, that we need to see a proper implementation of the polluter pays principle. And as I said before, it's the entity that is responsible for the operation of a plant. In aviation, it's the aircraft operator responsible for the emissions. In shipping, on the other hand, it is in principle the owner. And we're trying to highlight that to point out to the policymakers that it's not always the case in shipping. It's not always the ship owner running a ship being responsible for taking operational decisions. We need to bring into the picture the entity that takes operational decisions, because this is the entity responsible in the end for the emissions. This is the entity that needs to be encouraged to reduce emissions and take further operational measures. It's one of the main points we're raising with the policymakers, that we need to see a proper implementation of the polluter pays principle, especially under the EU ETS. And the way forward we prefer is to regulate the contracts. What we have proposed to the policymakers is that that a binding requirement is introduced in the EU ETS, so that the contractual parties, when they reach an agreement, they also include a clause about the pass-through of the costs to the operator, to the entity taking operational decisions.
Okay, thank you very much.
We're hopeful that that the policymakers will be receptive. In the past, the European Parliament was supportive of the idea.
We'll come on to Kuba. Could I ask if you could just, you could just send Sotirios an email saying he is freezing, so we can't hear him. Sunil, let me bring you in, and then I'm going to bring Eugen in, just to get your perspectives here on this whole issue. And what you're hearing today from this whole thing about the polluter pays. I mean, what is your position on this?
Okay, thanks, Sion. What I see is a great circus which is going around, where there are many performance and great entertainment. But in the end, nothing much has been achieved till date. The race to zero will not be won in the maritime sector without some major thrust towards the regulatory. The regulatory landscape is becoming very, very complex and challenging. It's very hard to keep a tab on it. And somehow there are many instruments which are not also aligned together. We have ISO 50000, EEOIU, RightShip, GHG rating, IMDOX, EU MRV, UK MRV, EXI, and now CII. So there are so many things are happening. And all of us in the office and on the ships, we are all confused how to make sure that we follow it properly. And then, as rightly somebody said, as managers, we do not have control over the ships we manage. So we see there are two types of owners. Big owners ordering futuristic zero carbon fleet with new technology, new fuel. And on the other hand, there are a majority of ship owners who are waiting for regulatory clarity and available zero carbon infrastructures. So we need to be ready as managers to be able to operate both kind of the ships to see the system going on. Then on the other hand, we have different type of fuels, and different fuels represent different challenges. We have ammonia coming in, hydrogen flammability and leakage point of. Then there are issues pertaining to storage, volume, weight, additional steel work, etc. So there are many things which are still not been sorted out with the new ships. On the operation side, we have already seen how much we faced problems when we were running the ships on low sulfur oil, and the same problems I anticipate in the future when the new oils will come into picture. Then we have the safety and crew, which people have not taken it, because with new technology, they have not been tested so much. So I personally feel there will be a safety issue coming in. The crew training will play an important role to find the right crew and train the crew so that we are able to run our ships properly. We do not land up in major disasters. So this will also play an important role in the coming of the future. But in the end, I'm quite positive. When the new regulations will come, we will be able to abide by it. And with the new technologies, I'm sure we will find the right crew and we will be able to train and run our ships. So that's what we are looking at.
And I think you're right there on the point that you're making, that shipping is very resilient, shipping is very innovative, it comes up with solutions, and I think really this is why it needs to be heard when it comes down to the role it plays. It is driving 90% of world trade, and gets vilified every time a ship comes into port and smoke's bellowing out of a funnel, but everybody's quite happy to receive their Amazon packages as a result of that. Eugen, finally, let me come in onto you just to get your perspective, and then we're going to open it up to the full debate. I can't believe we're already halfway through our time schedule already. And then after Eugen has given his words of wisdom, if I could ask the delegates and the other members if they have any questions, please send them in through the system or stick your hand up and Kuba will ask them on your behalf in person. Eugen, over to you for your 3 to 4 minute intervention.
Thank you, John, for the invitation. First and foremost, COP26 and Fit 55, failure and no failure. No, it's a journey. Yeah, it's a long journey to do something, and it cannot be a failure. It is the only forum what we have on an international forum to address. Now, if we will achieve through these measures that our climate change will be reversed and the global warming will turn into a certain global cooling, is a different cup of coffee. Definitely, everybody is forgetting that while we are cutting our emissions, we are at the same time increasing our energy demand. This is simply because of the way how our society is living. For the running of the Bitcoin, we need as much electricity as the entire country of Sweden. And if the internet by itself would be a country, it would be, after the United States being the first biggest country consuming energy, the internet would be the 6th largest country. And that is an ever increasing thing. As the same pace we are pushing forward for digitalization. So we have a big job to do, and it would be great if we would do that what Alistair said, if we would all live in a circular economy rather than in a linear economy. I believe that the journey has to go to a circular economy where we reuse and not waste, and include maybe our entire life cycle of a vessel into this. Now, with regard to InterManager and what role we can play, it is obvious that we need research and development in order to develop new propulsions and to develop new ships, as well as to operate the massive existing fleet more efficient. For this, we need research and development. Research and development is based on data. We need data. We need data of our equipment and data of the performance of the ships. And that data is more than speed, consumption, and cargo carried and distance traveled. We need data of our machinery, like in aviation, where even the lock for a toilet door is electronically documented. Any supplier who wants to supply any equipment to an aircraft has to provide a digital documentation about the equipment. This we are lacking in shipping. We do not have digital spare part catalogs, digital operational catalogs, and therefore we are physically in research and development not capable to perform what is publicly often stated, a digital twin. It's a dream and it's not a reality. So in InterManager and in the ship management industry, we have a huge buying power. We can sit down with suppliers and we can mandate suppliers to provide equipment with digital electronic documentation, which allows us to simulate how different equipments in combination can perform better, how we can be more reliable, and how we can use certain autonomous processes in shipping, which allows us to be eventually more efficient. Again, without data, we are not achieving anything. We need to push forward to get the marine and maritime equipment digitized. Once we do that, our funds which we throw into the ring now through levies or through private investments or through the European Union or United States government funds, whatever it is, will have a certain effect and we can do something. That would be my plea. Last but not least, whatever we do in shipping, we shall not forget, as the previous panelists stated, the existing fleet, crews on board of the existing fleets. We are talking about a different cultural behavior. So we need to educate, we need to bring the seafarers on board to behave better towards the environment. And only the ship managers, in my humble opinion, have it possible in their hands to do something like this because of their investment in training, because of their schools, their affiliations to universities, their large pools of seafarers, what they have, their in-house career development programs. Individual small ship owners will not be able to drive a cultural shift here. And the voice must be heard of the ship managers. And therefore, Mark is so right with his opening statement that we need to do more in order to achieve the cultural shift towards a lesser carbon intense industry. Thanks for listening.
Okay, thank you, Eugen. And I'm going to come straight into the debate now. And I mean, that raises a number of points there. Who's going to pay for the R&D, the centralizing of all the data? You've talked about fragmentation in the industry. You've also given examples of how some owners aren't as advanced as other owners, and you've got older fleets. And exactly right. I mean, there's a lot of big issues here. I'm going to sort of throw a point into the debate here and ask the panelists just to, interrupt each other and give us your points of view. But we've talked about shipping needing to get its home into order, and we've talked about the need to maybe including other elements such as the engine builders and engine manufacturers into it all. Who is to blame for this, for shipping not getting its home in order, or as Mark said, to even get the foundations built? Mark, do you want to start answering that? And I'll ask then panelists, stick your hands up. If you don't, I'll pick on you. But Mark, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. I mean, look, when I talked about getting the house in order, and I think I'm stealing an argument from Captain Adami from a previous conference when he gave a very startling fact, which has sort of lived with me since, that we're not looking. All of the debate is about the emissions from propulsion. We're not looking at the entirety of the carbon footprint of processes. So when one looks at the debate on which alternative fuels one should build into new vessel designs, one should also be considering that to build an LNG fueled vessel, it will be 5 years before you gain any carbon benefit from that over a conventional fueled vessel as it exists now. And maybe that's the narrative that we should be putting to COP26, that actually, let's set, rather than looking at 2050 or 2030, let's set ourselves a tighter timeline, because technology will be available very, very quickly now to build hydrogen vessels or whatever is the fuel of the future if we have a timeline. But look at the totality of it. And that's why I'm so disappointed that it's not the ship managers, because the ship managers aren't attributed the voice that they perhaps deserve. But I'm disappointed that shipping hasn't got its narrative together, that all of the big owners present at the shipping conference at COP26, of course they have the wherewithal to build an LNG fleet, but some of the smaller owners might not have, and that might just be missing the point. There's a bigger discussion there, there's a bigger debate there about extending the life of the existing fleet as carbon friendly as we can with all of the technology available, and at the same time making a much faster push for a completely carbon neutral fuel. Let's just say we extended the work fleet by 10 years, but in that time committed to the hydrogen alternative. But in doing so, we save the carbon footprint of building new LNG or dual-fueled LNG vessels, which will be 5 years before they have any benefit on the carbon footprint. So, you know, there's an intelligent debate around all of this that needs to happen, which I've not seen anything. I've only ever seen a debate around the emissions from propulsion, from the different fuels available. And that's what's lacking. And that's what shipping needs. And shipping needs to come together to present that, because otherwise, you know, as I said before at our AGM, if this was a boxing fight, you know, we need to be ringside. We're in the gods at the moment as far as shipping is concerned, because we haven't got, you know, a single voice, and we haven't had this intelligent debate that we have. And managers are at the heart of this, because we see everything. We see the full landscape.
So, Terence, let me bring you in. I'm sorry, we are going to pick on you a little bit today because you are representing the owners, and I do apologise. And I hope we've got a good connection with you there. I mean, Mark's made some very valid points there. I mean, you know, is shipping doing enough here to actually be able to tell its story properly? Is it missing out sectors of the industry? It is a highly varied and fragmented industry, as we know. Is it delivering its message strong enough? And are you talking with the other bodies and the level to which you should be, and bodies like the ICS should be doing? What's your views? And please, panelists, join in. So, Terence, over to you, sir.
To be honest with you, we need to admit that we are an industry that wasn't in the spotlight in the past. That it's the first time, at least in Europe, but Europe is also the front runner at international level. But it's the first time that regulators are stepping in and are ready to regulate emissions, climate emissions from shipping. And we need to be fair also with the industry, that we need it's a new political landscape for us, and we need to do our homework to refine our message and to go out and convince the policymakers where they need to be more cautious, what they need to fix, and what are the special characteristics of our industry they need to take into account. And I know that in the past it was the IMO regulating shipping. It has been mainly a UN process when it comes to environmental regulations for shipping. It's probably the first time that we see that regional players are taking action. But I have also to say that we are preparing, we're doing our homework. As European ship owners, we went public in January this year, putting forward a complete list of what are our conditions for the conditions for making proper and meaningful regulation. We organized a public event in January. We brought together members of the European Parliament, the European Commission, ship owners, the environmental NGOs, and we had an open discussion. And we agreed on some points. We disagreed on other points. And we took it from there. I have to say that we have made a lot of progress in Brussels, and we have managed to make our voice heard. We went public last week with a policy paper on the EU ETS, highlighting again the role of the commercial operator and the need to use these revenues generated under a carbon pricing mechanism for shipping for the energy transition of the sector, to use this money to bridge the price gap between clean fuels and conventional fuels. And surprisingly, I saw 5 minutes after we went public that our position was retweeted by the environmental NGOs. And the environmental NGOs were saying that, of course, that they support more action, but that they find our proposals a good starting point. I think that step by step, bit by bit, we strengthen our position. We are establishing new alliances with different stakeholders. And if I may make a point here, we need to bring the environmental NGOs closer to the industry. We need to work together. Of course, we're not on the same page. This is clear. But we need to create some synergies. For us, the target is that we make our voice heard. And I think that, again, gradually, we're getting there. Again, on the commercial operator position proposal, it's something that is been taken seriously these days in Brussels. I'm not saying that we will succeed in the end. It's a long process. It's a long shot, but our starting point is good these days.
Just touching on, and I'll bring others in a second, but touching on that point about convincing the policymakers and getting the voice heard. EXA has a very, very effective lobbying role in Brussels. We know that. You're very, very good at that. There are 96 organizations, I think I said in my questions, based in London representing global shipping. A lot of them don't have that facility. They don't have the lobbying power that you would have as EXA or the ICS has or Intertanko has or whatever. And there is a criticism that their voice is not heard because they don't have the facility to actually get up and actually be heard on that. So whether there is that room there for the industry in some sort of way to actually come together and in a united and a unified way put that point of view across to the regulators, be it in Europe or at the IMO. Alistair, let me bring you in. You had your hand up. There we go.
Yeah, Sean, it leads on to both what you and Sotirios were saying. And what I would like to say, that if we look across the global shipping community, there is and there will continue to be a huge difference in attitude towards decarbonisation and the investment in embracing new technologies. So it pains me to say it, but unfortunately, going forward, we will need regulations to ensure that there's a common platform. And when there's regulations, we have to have a voice in it. And that's the shipping industry, and that is ship managers. Because other than those with an absolute strict environmental conscience, without strict regulations, there are large sectors of the industry that would not invest in something that is a lot more expensive in order to sustain their existing operation. So it really pains me to say we need regulation going forward, but we need a voice in it, Sean.
Okay. Anybody?
Sean, if I can just add again, we are painfully out of sync with other industry sectors. We have a partnership with Total Energies, and we had the very great privilege of sitting down with them in Paris and listening to their energy transition model and plan, of which we're now partners. But they are looking at 2030 as an end date to go carbon neutral. You know, the automotive industry is looking at 2030, only electric cars sold in UK after 2030, and we're still looking at fit for 55. I mean, it's as though Greta Thunberg needs to knock on our door and sort of say wakey wakey, because we have to get in sync, and we have to explain to these other industry sectors that we're in an industry that has a 20-year, 25-year asset investment plan. And that has to be taken into account. So let's look at the totality. Let's look at the carbon footprint of the manufacture of the equipment, as Captain Adami talks about, not just the emissions from propulsion. And that has to be taken into account. Otherwise, regulation will be brought in and we'll be on the back end of it. We'll be the victims of that legislation and regulation. Will be, why wasn't this taken into account? We do have to lobby harder, fight harder, shout louder, and really make people understand how important this industry is. And you can't just replace the world fleet into a carbon neutral fleet in 10 years. You have to have a phasing out and a phasing in. And that's a debate that maybe we're not at that debate, and the debate is happening, but I'm not hearing about it, and it's not appearing even on the back page of any of the articles I'm reading or we're reading. We need to get our PR and our voice sorted out.
I'm going to bring in, we got some hands up here. I'm going to bring in Eugen first, and I'm going to bring in John, and then David, and then Kuba. Do you want to say something first? Is this a... No, okay. So Eugen first, then I'll bring in John, and then David. Eugen, you first.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. I have a statement to make to Sotiris. You said that you advocate for legislation and regulations which are just and tangible, appreciated. Why are you not considering to mandate that we receive our equipment with electronic documentation like in the aviation industry? Why is that not being mandated? Why are we still having Solar's statement stating somewhere down the road that a vessel must have a technical documentation, period? That's all what we have in Solar's, and we build LNG vessels. We will build highly sophisticated.
Okay, Eugen, you frozen. We got the nub of what you're saying there. So, Sotiris, do you want to answer that?
Just very quickly, there was a regulation proposed by the European Commission. I think that was 2 years ago or something. The European Maritime Single Window Environment, and in fact, we lobbied for making all the information, all the exchange of information, electronic and online. And in the end, the outcome wasn't a bad one. And I know that it's my colleagues here in EXA, they are working hard with their counterparts from the national associations, their different technical groups, trying to sort out everything and implement now this regulation. I think that would have been promoting and supporting, making all the exchange of information electronic and online.
Okay. All right. Thank you, John. John, let me bring you in, and then David.
Okay, so can you hear me again? I'm making a sound check.
Perfect.
So number one about this electronic documentation, you can easily request that when you enter into a shipbuilding contract that your documentation should be electronically. So you will get the ship delivered with electronic documentation. We have done it, and I know many other ship owners who has also done it. But I want to give a more provocative statement. Actually, we need to consider how to make ourselves jobless, because we have a lot of transport going on in the world today, and I think when we buy our shoes today, they might be designed in London, produced in China, and then we wear them wherever we live. And if we look back, maybe 50 years, 100 years, or even further back, of course, everything was produced locally. And if we can come back to moving manufacturing out of China, moving it out of Asia, moving manufacturing closer to the consumers, and somehow have a road tax or sea tax for transport in itself, because China and Asia is like the last frontier of low-cost manufacturing, and China is not cheap anymore. Now they're cheap because they are effective. But I know at least in Sweden, quite a few of the big companies are bringing manufacturing back to Europe. We saw the issue now with the vaccine. There was a big shortage. Vaccine could only be produced in India, basically. We saw the chips with the cars, big issues. Now you go to buy a new car today in Cyprus, you might have to wait 12 months, right? Because the chip is not there. So I think we should look at it not only from shipping itself, but also what shipping is doing. Now the container shipping industry is running in hyperdrive, right? While the tanker market is really, really down low. So maybe look on it from an entirely different global perspective, and just don't look only on tankers, only on passenger ships, only on container ships. maybe there should be a tax on transport in itself. It's just a different way to look at it.
Well, what are people's views on that? Let me ask before I come on to David. Well, Mark, Kuba, you wanted to say something?
Well, I can comment on it. Obviously, it would be extremely good what John suggests, but I don't know how shipping can actually contribute to that. But I was reading something very interesting recently, and it really struck very similar chord with John. If we're talking about vegetarians nowadays, and it is becoming so popular not to eat meat, for example, and when you check where do we get our food from in order to get the vegetarians going, then it's not local, I'm afraid, in Europe at least. You cannot get, obviously in Europe we've got seasons. So you have to transport a lot of stuff from South America or Africa or whatever. But I think this discussion is going in the wrong direction now, John, because this is not what we can do. This is not a hanging fruit we can access. Or maybe I'm too constrained in seeing what you are suggesting for shipping. But what I wanted to say, okay, sorry, yes, John, because you want to.
I'm not going to forget David, because poor David's been hanging on down the bottom there, so I'm not going to forget him in a second. But John, you quickly answered.
Yeah, quickly. I mean, just about food. We have now a local website in Cyprus where you order food, and actually they give you the CO2 emissions on the plate that you order with the transport to your door. And I find it very, very, even if it's incorrect, the figures, I don't know, but it's a nice trend to see. So even when you order your meal, you can actually see how much your meal will pollute.
Yeah. Yeah, we're starting to get
that. It's not a bad idea that product should be labeled with the CO2 emissions, from Nike shoes to your tomatoes coming from Holland, right? At least it can give some perception what it costs for the environment. So maybe by itself we can sort it out, because we should by default design ourselves out of work, at least in the container industry, tankers, passenger ships, whatever. But we need awareness. We need to raise awareness. How much do we pollute? I mean, even oil majors with all these 10, 12 TMSA orders per year flying on business class, my light goes off because I have a motion sensor. Yeah. I mean, everything costs in transport and CO2. That's what I want to say.
Environmentalists.
David, let me bring you in on this. I'm going to come on to Satiris on this after, but David, you have the floor.
I've forgotten what I was going to say, but oh yeah, I just remembered.
It was about an hour ago.
I just want to address the point that Mark made about it. Yeah, accelerating the targets rather than trying to meet the rather long-term targets that exist under IMO at the moment. And there was a declaration submitted to COP26 by the Getting to Zero Coalition, and this is a coalition of Global Maritime Forum, World Economic Forum, Friends of the Ocean Action, and they're trying to demonstrate the viability of alternative fuels, and that these are not wishful thinking. They can be utilized if we take the right approach in the short term, not in the long term. And it struck me that a very good example of that was illustrated on a recent BBC Hard Talk interview with the chairman of Fortescue's Metal Group, Andrew Forrest. And FMG they have made a statement and a declaration of achieving zero carbon transportation and mining production by 2030. And that includes their shipping activities. So the whole value chain will be decarbonized, and they will be producing green hydrogen in developing countries to boot, where they have energy availability that can be used for the chemical process. But why is it achievable with FMG? I think it's because FMG are the cargo owners, they're the ship owners, and they're the commercial operators. So the alignment of those three interest groups that are typical within shipping have the same objective. So where one may lose out financially, the other will gain. And he was very clear that they're not going to lose money by doing this. They will make a buck. And that was his actual term, his wording. They will make a buck about this. If someone like FMG can do it, and I have no doubt they will, because he's a very forceful chairman, and they're a strong company with a strong balance sheet, and they're highly motivated. If they can do it, then surely, if legislation is driving those three interest parties to a common goal more, the cargo owners, the ship owners, and the commercial operators, then other sectors of the industry can achieve the same result as well, much earlier than by legislation.
Okay, brilliant. Satiris, do you have any comments you want to make? Please.
A very short comment on the interesting idea about taxation, and something that has been promoted by other stakeholders, by climate activists as well, that taxation will sort it out. However, we have to take into account that if it's about reflecting the full external costs on the price by introducing either a carbon pricing mechanism in the form of the ETS or a levy or a tax, the costs will go up significantly. And we all know, we know what is now the political landscape in Europe with the rising energy prices. Although the full external cost is not reflected on the energy price. And I think that the purpose of introducing taxation is to make the uptake of cleaner fuels more attractive. But if we look at the figures, the abatement costs for shipping start around 200 euros per ton CO2. It can go up to a couple of thousand of euros for more advanced and cleaner technologies. And the current price of the EU ETS, which is, if I'm not mistaken, the largest carbon pricing scheme in the world, the current carbon price of the EU ETS is around 60 euros per ton CO2. So a carbon pricing mechanism, be it a levy, ETS, or a tax, cannot do the job by itself unless it pushes the total price high enough to price the gap between clean fuels and conventional fuels. But I don't think that this is what we want. I don't think that we want to crush the industry. The purpose of a carbon pricing mechanism should be to recycle these revenues for the uptake of cleaner fuels. And this is not, again, enough by itself. We probably need also some guidance. What kind of fuels will be the fuels of the future? The fuels really delivering carbon savings. So we need a basket of measures, and we need to be also realistic that taxes or levies or a carbon pricing mechanism like the ETS cannot do the job by itself.
John, you got your hand up. Do you want to say something?
No, I mean, I didn't have, but I can say it anyway. I don't support the taxing business to death, but I think as I said before, repeat, we need to look on the necessity of transport. Because I believe, or I suspect at least, that moving manufacturing back from Asia to Europe could help a lot if you see the number of container ships on the water today and what they actually are transporting. So a different economy. And pricing in China is coming up, cost in Europe is coming down. So I'm just saying there might be an opportunity to move manufacturing, which would not have so much transport in it at the end. It's just an assessment I have. It could be completely wrong, of course. No empirical evidence. It's just a feeling.
We've got about 10 minutes left. It's been a very, very strong debate. What I want to do is just turn a little bit to the future, what we can do now to try and improve the situation moving forward. I mean, we've heard what we've all got to say on a whole range of issues here. The last 2 years have really sort of heightened all of our awareness of what the industry needs to do, how digitalization, what the role digitalization will play, the importance of emissions against, the impact of a pandemic, etc. What should shipping now be doing? What should be on the list of priorities as an industry? And I'm going to shove that. Mark, haven't heard from you for a wee while. What are your thoughts on that? Moving forward now, looking, we have this conversation in 2 years' time, 3 years' time. What have we achieved?
I think we. Sorry, I've got an echo. I think
we can hear you. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, I think we have intelligent, wider debate on the, if you like, the holistic carbon footprint of the industry, and in that debate, reach conclusions as to what is actually achievable and what is not. And, I think Captain Adami said, we can't replace our fleet. That fleet does have an asset lifetime that has to be respected, and there is value in that. Then grab the bull by the proverbial horns and come up with a plan, an industry plan, which gets us towards carbon neutrality much, much quicker than 2050, and that which drives our technology. And there are geniuses out there who will tell us you can achieve hydrogen powered vessels very easily within the 10 years if you want to. We're just putting a new microscope into space, for goodness sake, that defies all logic as to technology. We can certainly achieve hydrogen propulsion within 10 years, within 15 years, but come up with a plan, and then we control the narrative. And once we control the narrative, the future COP26, and this is not the first this is not the last of these conferences, will take shipping much more readily and will understand our concerns. But at the moment, we seem to be too much on the sidelines and making sound bites and not enough dictating the strategy or controlling the narrative. I really do think we need to grab the bull by the horns and come up with a credible, holistic, comprehensive, intelligent plan.
David, let me bring you in then. Kuba, grabbing the bull by the horns. I just remember just one quick thing when I was on Lloyd's List going to the Uruguay round of trade talks, GATT talks at Brussels, reporting on it. And the whole thing was held up because right at the last minute, they decided they're just shoving shipping and it held things up. Shipping seems to always be that little appendage at the end that they just think is all okay and it can be added in. David, grabbing the bull by the horn, shipping being by the ringside rather than up in the gods. What are your views moving forward?
Well, the comment I was going to make was maybe ask the question somewhat, but it's more related to try to switch the narrative from shipping being forced to change because of legislation to taking the opportunity of change for the better. I was a bit horrified with Kuba's idea about shipping should take on more heavy fuel oil and be the repository of all this stuff. We've been doing that for decades, and it's made life at sea hellish for engineers who have to deal with the processing equipment for that. It's a terrible job. If we want to attract crewing in the future, the ships of the future, including the new technologies for carbon-free propulsion, have to be better places of work. And we can take the opportunity of changing those designs to attract crew who expect to have a decent working environment. The automotive industry has done this. They recognize that electric cars actually have a lot of attributes that are far more advantageous to drivers than the internal combustion engine can ever offer. And I've just bought an electric car, funny enough, and I can tell you it's a fantastic experience. I like it. It has more torque than the average petrol engine car. There are lots of advantages to it, and we can recreate that positivity in shipping if we so wish to design it. It's just making the effort to do so.
But you are very lucky, David. There aren't
charging your car. Were you charging your electric car when John's lights went out, David? Is that the reason?
And David, there's no speed limit on the Isle of Man roads. That's the only reason you got an electric car, so you can go as fast as you like, really. We can't do that over here.
It will only do 99 miles an hour, but it'll get to 99 miles an hour in about 3 seconds.
Kuba, are you going to be following David on in your yacht in your alongside? But anyway, what you wanted to make a comment?
I did indeed, and my comment was earlier on your ideas of speaking and PR. And I'm thinking, Sean, you are very well positioned. You used to work in Lloyd's. Now you are a PR company for many managers. If we were to ask you to be a facilitator and go outside or bridge between shipping industry and other industries, and following on David's idea, let's not be called in, but let's call others in and say, hey, other industries, let's get together. By doing that, what I'm thinking is to educate people, to show them, then we do really have a low-hanging fruits, like virtual arrivals. If we were to say to the world, we can reduce the carbon emission by 25%, just like that, but we need you to cooperate. We need you to understand what virtual arrival is. And then we got it. And we don't need any penny to be spent. It will be just like that. And you are there to help us to reach to all these guys and bring them to the table so we can talk. And I bet they will open the mouths wide and say, wow, we didn't know that we can do that. And actually, we can work together with you to do that, to achieve that. Yeah, and I'm not going to fight back on the heavy fuel with David, because I still believe there is something in it. The world will be screaming what to do with heavy fuel in very short time, because as a world, we've got no idea to do what to do with heavy fuel. Over.
Just answering that point, it's a very valid point and a good one. And definitely, I mean, there's a proliferation of these associations representing, cargo elevator companies, representing ports, master mariners, representing everything in the shipping industry. They're based in London. Getting them together. What will actually also be attractive to them is knowing that big organizations like EXA, like Intertanko, like InterManager, Intercargo are also part of that and want to work with them. And I think if we manage to achieve that, there's no reason why you couldn't have even having a conference or a webinar like this with all these other associations. Certainly food for thought on that. John and then Eugen. John.
I really have no further comments. I think we all understand that we are in this boat together, but for the ship owner and ship manager alone to sit in that boat is not enough. We need a commercial side involved. We need the shipyards involved. We need the engine makers involved. It's all together. A ship manager can do nothing, only manage the ship. The ship owner can only buy the ships that the shipyard can deliver. The shipyard can only build the ship steel, basically, because everything else is subcontracted out that the engine makers delivers. And the only thing on top that overrides everything is the rules and regulations and the market environment. We live in a very, very tough market environment, and it's appalling to see when the brokers changes heading from west to east just because there is a dollar change per ton of the cargo, right? And creating transport work. So transport work tax is an element of it, but not the only one, plus limiting actually our workload on the container side to reduce the transport work worldwide. Why do we need to create or produce all the Christmas toys in China? And this year the Christmas toys are also all getting smaller, as you know, because they can't produce the big Christmas toys anymore because the container freight rate is too high. So it's a very strange world. It's very complex. And there is no one decision maker that can say 2030 we should all be on hydrogen and let's make the plan, because you will have the Japanese saying we all want to be on methanol, right? So or ammonia, sorry, not methanol. They will all be on ammonia. They're already building ships now for ammonia in Japan, while the Western world all want hydrogen. So as usual, nobody can agree, but we need to ventilate all the ideas and look on this problem from all aspects, not only carbon trading, which I think is very limited. So it's extremely complex, and there needs to be a lot of brains together. And at some point in time, there have to be a decision maker, and the only real decision maker we have today is IMO. There is nothing else that really governs shipping the way that IMO does, even if they're slow, even if they're useless sometime, even if they can never agree, they're always late, but still it's the only body that can really decide. So it needs to be pushed to IMO.
I think the other thing, Sotiris, on this is actually influencing the member states as far as that's concerned. Yeah. You raised one point there, and I'm going to touch on it. I think we should all make a pledge, and it's a hypothetical pledge, that any future conferences held in the shipping industry should always have a charterer or a customer there also contributing, because they are the element that we all seem to be missing out. Sotiris, you've got your hand up, and then Eugen as well, because Eugen will have to bring you in afterwards. Sotiris, over to you.
Thank you. Just a short comment on the role of the IMO and the role of the EU. Of course, our strong preference is that the IMO deals with the whole issue, and everything is regulated at international level. We're an international industry and we need a level playing field. But we have to recognize at the same time that Europe is taking action and they're introducing a carbon pricing mechanism for shipping and a fuel standard for ships calling at EU ports. It's something that is happening now, and it's a regulation that will be introduced in a 3-year period. And we need also to take this into account, not only because Europe is probably the largest jurisdiction in the world, it's also the fact that other jurisdictions might also go the same path and copy-paste these regulations. It's also the fact that the Europeans speak with 27 voices at IMO level. And once there is a regulation in place in Europe, the European countries have to line up behind the EU flag, supporting the EU proposals. And that makes a huge difference at IMO level as well. Certainly, the IMO is the global regulator of shipping, but what we have seen, what we are experiencing is a shift to Europe, not only because Europe is a big and key player, it's also about the Europeans represented by 27 different member states at IMO level. And a last comment about the narrative, I don't think that there is an industry really capable of controlling the narrative, no matter how powerful an industry is. The oil majors, the financing industry, I personally don't think that these sectors are in position to control the narrative. The narrative is the one we read in the papers. We see people taking to the streets, protesting. We have seen a wave of green parties in Europe, especially in the north of Europe, winning one election after the other. We have seen that the Greens will be a major coalition partner in Germany. Climate policies are coming up and we have to deal with it. I would probably say that we need to come up with our own narrative, convincing arguments that fit the general narrative. But countries, nations will take action to deal with the climate crisis.
Okay, Eugen, let me bring you in, and then I'm going to bring in Alistair. Sunil, we haven't heard from you for a wee while, and then John. We've really only got about 5 or 6 minutes left. We've gone over time, but Eugen, keep it wise and short.
I want to be brief. I believe that our associations and ourselves, we are extremely busy talking to ourselves, and this is what we are doing since decades. We wanted to improve image of shipping 30 years ago, and now we want to do other things. We don't realize that talking to ourselves is not really helpful. And when you put voices together, as Mark is saying, you may achieve something. You need a different audience if you want shipping to be really changed. Talking to ourselves doesn't help. So that's why the argument of creating a larger voice of managers, of ship managers, may be similar to what we have consulting status of Ajax to IMO is really something which would help. And I think ship managers are charged here to do something, and associations are charged to cooperate with other associations in order that you get a wider footing.
Okay, lovely. Alistair, let me bring you in.
Yeah, I'll be equally as brief. And I think in 2023, we will see the regulations come in, we'll see the changes come in. But I think a final note is we must never forget that we're a people industry, and without our colleagues on board the ships, we're absolutely nothing. So my wish in 3 years' time that our colleagues at sea have been trained to handle the hazardous new fuels, the potentially hazardous new fuels, the ammonias, the hydrogens, and dare I say it, the nuclear, because I forecast that we will see nuclear cells on board ships, and our colleagues at sea will have to handle them, and as indeed will our colleagues in the office. Thank you.
Okay, Sunil, nice to hear you again. It's been about an hour. Your comments, sir.
Yeah, I was listening to some interesting discussions. There is one thing which somehow shipping has not been able to put forward is there to clean up their image. When you ask a 5-year-old child to draw a ship, he or she will draw a ship with the smoke on top of a funnel. Still till today, and that's the reason anybody who thinks about the ship is that there is a resistance to change, and these are the main polluters, although we may be a very small part in the whole chain. So there is one thing. And the second, now the ball is rolling, and you will play a very important role in making sure that these new regulations are being implemented very quickly. Maybe a lot of pressure from their own people, as Sotre said about the new parties winning elections, and they need to show that they are doing something for the environment. So this will come very, very quickly. The second thing, on the shipping front, we need to identify the technologies which we have to. You cannot have ships running with different technologies and different fuel. Where are we going to get people? And till today, and I'm sure for coming years, many years, we require people to run those ships safely. And that's why it's so important that when we move forward, whoever is designing, whichever the countries and governments and the shipbuilders and engine makers, they need to come up with a solid plans as we had for last couple of years. We knew what is the fuel for all our ships. So we need to have something very, very common in order to avoid major accidents and incidents on board the ship. So in the last, I see the change will come very quickly. Things will happen now, and but we need to also be shown as participating in that change rather than just standing by and waiting for implementation of various regulations on us. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. John, final word over to you, sir. Can't hear you, John.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
So I think what we may see going forward is different waves of actions and technologies coming up. But besides nuclear fuel or nuclear powered vessels, there is no single zero carbon fuel available today, and excluding wind, of course, that can take the place of the current fuel oil. So now we have a lot of technologies on the market. We have rotor sails, we have things about the rudder, the propeller, etc. We have a bubble system under, but we're still talking about very, very minor improvements of the carbon footprint. So it's a new fuel that is required. LNG is not the future fuel. LNG is most likely transition fuel at best, maybe up to 2030, 2040, maybe in 2050, because it gives 23% less. But after that, somebody have to contain either hydrogen or ammonia to make real big changes. And I don't know how, and I don't know when, but we are of course following this very, very closely. Personally, I think hydrogen appears to be more or less possible. Yes, it's explosive, but still technology is there, and with a bit of refinement could probably be placed on board the ship. Personally, again, I don't believe in ammonia because of the toxicity. One spill will kill the fuel forever. So we need time.
Yeah.
We need time, and we have our deadline set by IMO, set by EU, and we have to comply. But unfortunately, now when ships starts to get down-rated engines on lower speed, we need more ships on the water, and we need to try to minimize transport. So it's a global problem. There needs to be a global control room, maybe somewhere. Some king sitting somewhere and saying, you go here and there, but you don't do that. You don't turn the ship around and do that, because they need to attack it in a different way. It's too isolated attacks here and there, but there's no consistent holistic approach for the entire planet. It's still very much in isolation in my mind. And EU, yes, they are strong, but maybe they are strong and have so many members in IMO because IMO is slow. They are very slow. There are too many members sitting there with no seafaring nations, and it becomes a bit sporadic sometimes.
John,
So
thank you very much.
It's a challenging future, yes.
It is a challenge, and thank you very much indeed. An amazing debate today. I mean, we've been going on for just short of, 20 minutes short of 2 hours. So we've done ever so well here today. We could carry on, I'm sure, another. I just hark back to what Mark said earlier, that he wants to buy somebody a very large drink or something in Cyprus. So I think you're probably all getting rather dry there, dry mouth. Thank you so much. Thank you very much indeed for your time today, for your input, for your intellectual input. It's tremendous having the leaders of the industry, such as yourselves, sitting there talking to us, giving your views, and also debating between yourselves. Kuba, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you, Kuba, for organising this. Really, really good webinar for InterManagers. I think really it will be welcomed, I think, by your members. I'm sure we will edit it and give a link to you so you can put it on your website and et cetera, et cetera. But I hand over to you for the last words. So thank you.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you everybody who participated and watched us.